Hi guys and welcome back to the Bike Cave. It's been more than 2 years since I last released a training related video and I had a good reason to do it. I actually stopped uploading training videos on YouTube because I was developing the XC Cycling Slave cylinders and I didn't want to publicly show that I was working on something like that until I officially released them. After that, I had to make some videos about their characteristics and their maintenance, and so the focus of the channel shifted a bit from the variety of topics I used to discuss in the past. So now that the XC Cycling Slave cylinders have been released, I wanted to discuss with you what changed in my training over the past 2 years, and I've gone from training like that to training like this. Actually, Jack happened. Almost 2 years ago, I started training with Jack Carthy and I became a trainee of the Carthy Academy. This added a new twist on the way I approach training, and I bet that if you follow me on social media, you may have seen me changing the way I ride over the past couple of years. The most notable change in my riding was that I started training so as to be able to ride and roll everywhere. This gave me a better feel of my bike, and so I gradually learned how to move together with it. I have to admit that it was quite hard at the beginning and I was feeling like I was constantly fighting the bike, but it got a lot better with time. Another change that I did in my training routine was that I started training a lot more on natural terrains, and although it was quite challenging in the beginning, I started feeling a lot more confident as my riding was progressing. The next key point that have been changed in my riding since I started training with the Carthy Academy was that I started trying longer lines, combining both static and rolling moves that improved my riding endurance without even noticing it. Also, one more thing that I'm pretty happy I developed during this period was my pedal up technique. I started training sequential pedal ups mixing the different pedal up techniques, and once I got it, I kept this sequence as part of my warm-up routine for quite a long time, and I still do it from time to time. After getting more confident with pedal ups, I started doing them on natural spots, and this was actually quite satisfying as I started feeling more comfortable to roll on any terrain. My next goal was to start feeling more comfortable on my front wheel, and this can be really helpful on many different moves. This required to change both my handlebars and the angle that they were mounted on my bike. That change took me a while to get used to, but once I did, it felt quite good. Then I started training a lot my two front moves, but this is something that I still have to work on in the future. However, with practice came progress, and I now feel a lot more comfortable landing on my front wheel. But I still have to do a lot of work on this one. At that point, we're talking about a full year into training with Jack Carthy, and still I haven't mentioned the most important change in my training, and this was the frequency I ride my bike. All these changes in my training routine kept me very engaged and focused on my training progress that I started training more often than ever before. But still, I wasn't training as often as I really could, but I hadn't realized it yet. Then, last May, I visited Jack Carthy and I had the opportunity to spend a week with him training and observing the lifestyle of a professional rider and more importantly, the everyday schedule of a champion. I have to admit that this was quite transformative for me, as I realized that I could train more often than I thought, as we had at least 2 training sessions per day while I was there. This completely changed my misconception about the training frequency I was going for every week. I used to be happy if I could find some time to train every week, and this approach used to give me 2 to 3 training sessions per week. Now I actively try to find some time to train as often as possible, and this usually gives me about 5 to 6 or sometimes even 7 training sessions per week. But this is a topic for another video. Also, visiting Jack and training with him up close allowed him to check out my riding and the areas I could work on from this point onwards. So, after my visit there, I got a lot of homework to work on during the summer. The most important area that I know how to develop on my riding was my ability to balance on rocks and move from point to point, as well as to roll on tricky downslopes. So you may have seen me trying lines where I reposition my bike from rock to rock or rolling down on steep rocks. I still have a lot of work to do on this, and I'm so happy that I've managed to get better control of the bike than I used to have. I trained like that during the summer, and then this October I visited Jack Carthy again for another week of training and coaching. This time I had done my homework, and also the spots we rode felt a bit more familiar as I've been there in the past. The experience was great once again, and I left with a ton of homework to do until next time. I think that the highlight of the past couple of years of training with the Carthy Academy was that I actually had the opportunity to train and live with Jack for these 2 weeks, and of course, see him riding up close. The homework that I got after my 2 visits there was so crucial for my development as a rider, as sometimes we cannot realize on our own that it's the small moves and the basics such as our balance and control that we have to work on to develop our riding as a whole. So that's it for today, guys, and please drop a comment below if you stayed up to that point. Also, I hope that you like this type of video and enjoyed my training journey over the past couple of years. Thanks so much for subscribing and watching, and make sure that you don't miss the next video, as it's going to be a special one. Bye!
There. You see the lump where it's up here? Yeah. You need to go from there. So you have to, if you're going to go over onto the low one, and you're going to go to the wheel, roll the front all the way down. Yeah. Use this leg. Then you can just. And if you're going to go to this one, because you're going up a bit more, you need to go more like this.